and good afternoon. And today we're going to be talking about coping personally and professionally as a teacher during a pandemic. And this is the last in our Faculty of Humanities and Education webinar series. And our presenters today, we have Dr. Carol Gentles. She's a lecturer in teacher education and development at the School of Education. We have Dr. Sharline Cole. She is also a lecturer in educational psychology at the School of Education. And I am Tashane Haynes-Brown, a lecturer in teacher education and development at the School of Education. So welcome to today's panel. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat section in YouTube. And so we're going to go over to Dr. Gentles, who will be talking to us a little bit more about what it means to be a teacher during a pandemic and before this pandemic. Dr. Gentles, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Now, our presentation today is underscored by a key concern. What can we as teachers learn from our experiences during this pandemic that can inform how we think about our work and practice as teachers in the future? To help us think this concern through, we're going to address three questions. What did it mean to be a professional teacher before the pandemic? And what does it mean to be a professional teacher during the pandemic? And what does the pandemic experience mean for the professional teacher in the future? So before we start, it might be useful for us to think a little bit more about the concept of the term the professional teacher. So what is a professional teacher? Well, at the most basic level, the definition of the professional teacher refers to the status of a person who is paid to teach. But on a higher level, it refers to teachers who are professionals, represent the best in the profession, and they're the ones who set the highest standard for best practice. But teaching also at a professional level is an advanced and complex undertaking. And why is this so? Now, the teacher as a person and the teacher as a professional have to have certain attributes, behaviors, and attitudes. As a person, we expect the teacher to have certain morals, values, and personality traits associated with good teaching. As a professional, we expect the teacher to have skills, knowledge, professional dispositions, such as being able to manage a classroom and to organize it. The professional teacher has to know how to organize content for instruction. He or she has to know how to implement instruction. He or she has to know how to monitor student progress and to understand the potential of his or her students. The professional teacher also needs to have a commitment to continuous professional learning for him or herself and must also strive to maintain professional standards of the teaching profession. Now, before this thing called COVID-19 became a reality, globally, teachers were striving to fulfill all these expectations associated with being a professional teacher and many more. Many did so successfully, but we also know that many have been challenged professionally and personally. And this is because teaching as a profession has been recognized as being demanding and very stressful. So teachers experience stress when the demands of the classroom exceeds their ability to cope with these demands. So what does teacher stress look like? So research suggests that teachers feel stressed when they have to teach unmotivated students, when they have to sustain discipline in the classroom, when the workload they have is demanding, when they're being exposed to frequent changes like a new curriculum every year, when they have to undergo performance appraisal and be evaluated, when they find that the relationships at work with colleagues or administrators are difficult or challenging. And a source of stress that affects many teachers globally is poor working conditions. So how does stress impact teachers? Well, we know that teachers suffer with burnout. Many suffer with chronic stress. They're frustrated, they're demotivated. Many of them lose their self-esteem and their capacity to work. And also, this leads to high levels of attrition from the profession. So we know that attrition rates among teachers in some parts of the world are linked significantly to job-related stress. We also know that on an average globally, approximately 40% of new teachers leave the profession within their first 5 years. In the case of Jamaica, we have been told that we have lost about 350 to 1,000 of our teachers a year since 2000. And this is due to their increasing feelings of stress. Teachers feel they're unable to manage the personal and professional demands of teaching in Jamaican schools. So then along came COVID. And we are suggesting that the challenges of coping with COVID-19 were added to the challenges of coping that teachers were having before the pandemic. So what did this look like? What did this mean for teachers? So what it meant in effect was that teachers were suddenly expected to be frontline workers who could manage to help all the students and parents under lockdown to just cope and keep things normal. Go ahead. So what did this mean? How have teachers coped? So what was the impact of the pandemic on teachers professionally and personally? So first of all, when COVID struck, the world of teaching changed overnight in the middle of a semester. So from one day to the next, teachers were asked to stay at home, and they were asked to start switching from teaching in the physical space to teaching in virtual spaces. And unfortunately, they had to do so very often with limited knowledge, with limited skills for online delivery, with limited or no access to resources to support online teaching. A lot of them had no pedagogical skills to support managing students online. There was no plan or no training for this. They were very much left to figure it out on their own. And at the very beginning of this crisis, our leaders were struggling to get their act together. So the leadership for teachers was also quite poorly defined. So the nature of their work changed. Now, 1 minute they were teaching onto line, now they had to deliver a curriculum. First they were teaching face-to-face, now they had to deliver the same curriculum online. This meant more work, like developing new lesson plans, figuring out how to manage online classrooms by developing new skills and strategies. And remember too that the students themselves were new to this environment. Students didn't know how to learn online. Motivating students online was different. Assessing and monitoring student progress and learning was different. Engaging students was different. And teachers now had to change their accustomed ways of managing teaching time to moving to an environment where the demands for time on task were different and much greater. And they also had to start meeting new expectations for accountability. Now they had to present different lesson plans for approval. They had to write reports about what they were doing online. And what was the impact of this on the teachers? Many had fears and anxieties about being locked down. They were also worried about getting coronavirus themselves. And the task of being a frontline worker was extremely overwhelming. Many worried about their students. Research shows that in the Jamaican context, as in many other places, teachers are very concerned with caring for their students, especially the most vulnerable ones, because they see this as a core part of their work as a professional teacher. But the lockdown made it challenging to meet the needs of their students in the ways that they're accustomed to. So, things like providing meals for students, giving them a breakfast money, giving them extra tutelage, mentoring and nurturing, and doing everything they can to pass exams, to help their students pass exams because they want their students to have a chance for upward social mobility. All of these things became very challenging to do in a situation where everyone was locked down and had to communicate online. So now the pandemic is still here. It's not over. But things are changing again. So currently, our teachers are still struggling with all these challenges that have been confronting them. They're beginning to cope better because school leaders and the Ministry of Education have rallied to provide improved support. And teachers are being recognized globally for their contribution. In some cases, they're being called heroes for what they've been done. But the reality is that now there's a change again. They have to return to the physical classroom spaces. And so now they have to navigate new knowledge of how to manage students and teaching in the new COVID environment with safety measures and social distancing. So what does this pandemic experience mean for the professional teacher in the future? And I'm now going to turn over to Dr. Haynes-Brown, who's going to share with us what this means.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gentles. And so as we talk about this, one thing is clear to us is that we are in fact in a paradigm shift in education. And when we talk about a paradigm shift, we're talking about a fundamental change in the basic practices and concepts in terms of how we do education. And so we're also clear that teaching and learning may never go back to the way it was, because this COVID-19 crisis has resulted in a paradigm shift in how learners of all ages worldwide can access learning. Were we prepared in Jamaica for this paradigm shift? I would say we were not necessarily very prepared, because all over the media, there were conversations about our state of readiness. Headlines such as many students are being left behind during the COVID-19. There's a need for a national learning policy. Ministry of Education, different sectors were urging teachers to use technology for teaching and learning. And all of these things are an indication that we were not quite ready for this paradigm shift. And so as we wanted to get a sense of what was happening on the ground here at the School of Education, Dr. Gentles, Sharline, and I, we decided to have a conversation with a group of 30 of our teachers who were students at the UA. And we asked them about how it is that they were managing their teaching and learning during the COVID-19 lockdown. And many of them indicated that they were sending materials via email and WhatsApp. They were posting materials on drives and cloud storage spaces. They were using learning management platforms, some of them for the very first time. They were using live teaching sessions. Everybody jumped on board, learning how to use Zoom and Google Meets. And there were also teachers who used one-on-one teaching sessions via the telephone, social media. We also saw online persons advertising how committed teachers were, writing on town notice boards, using the town cry media, dropping things off at church and community centers. And so these were some of the ways that the teachers were teaching during the COVID-19 lockdown here in Jamaica. The other interesting part of that discussion with these teachers, when we asked them about the students' participation in the learning activities, more than 80% of them indicated that less than half of their students were in fact engaging in the different ways that the teachers were trying to reach out to them. And that is cause for concern. And when we asked them about their experience, how would they describe it? What word would you use to describe it? For the most part, the comments seemed to be more negative than they were positive. And so you would notice that ideas relating to the experience being one that is challenging, overwhelming, tedious. In fact, one teacher went as far as to describe the experience as torture. While there were some mixed feelings, there were a few teachers who indicated that it was enjoyable and it was also an interesting experience that they were having during this COVID-19 lockdown period that they had to teach online. Now, just to give an example of how these teachers described this experience in terms of what made it challenging, this was one of the typical ways that teachers expressed that idea. And this particular teacher explained that teaching online had been challenging for both the teachers and the students, but most of the students, because the students were faced with a lack of device, internet issues, and the parents were also complaining of not having enough money to purchase data. So these were some of the circumstances in which teaching and learning during this pandemic was made more challenging. In terms of what made this experience enjoyable, again, we saw teachers talking about, the opportunity to learn more about the various platforms was something that was enjoyable. The fact that they were able to interact with the devices and their students was also fun. And the students, they felt, were learning more about using these devices and also learning how to adjust to a new way of learning. And so here we're seeing that there are different experiences that came out of this COVID-19 teaching and learning exercise. So what can we learn from what is happening now in education in Jamaica? Just from listening to the different examples of how teachers have gone above and beyond for their students, it is evident that our teachers are committed to teaching, but it also means that they are struggling to make the leap. Another thing that is also evident from what is happening now is that being a lifelong learner is going to be an indispensable trait that every teacher must possess. Teachers also must be trained to teach in new ways. It is no longer going to be enough for us to teach our teachers how to use the traditional modalities. We will have to now rethink the way we do teacher education in Jamaica. There's going to be need for us to have more blended learning opportunities being presented, teaching our teachers how to transform their pedagogy in new ways. It also teaches us that access to internet and technology in Jamaica will have to become universal. Students will also have to become self-motivated learners. If less than half of students were in fact engaging with the online materials, there is also something that needs to be done on the part of our students. Another thing that was also a lesson to be learned from this experience was that parental involvement is going to be paramount. And the flipped classroom that we have been talking about for so long can no longer merely be a discussion for board and staff meetings. It will have to become a reality. So what can we learn from all of this? What are some of the key implications going forward if we are to be successful in this paradigm shift? It means, therefore, that our government will have to mobilize the major telecom service providers in Jamaica to boost internet connectivity and the service for online education, especially in our underserved areas. It also means that government will have to play a major role in helping us as we upgrade the bandwidth for our major educational online service platforms that will have to serve hundreds of thousands of visitors simultaneously. It also means that the government will have to come up with creative ways of mobilizing the society-wide resources for the provision of online courses and resources, making our online platforms accessible for students in a similar manner that they had done it for some of the government websites and platforms. These are some of the implications for government. When we think about what will need to be done on the part of our schools, it also has implications for what our administrators need to consider. Schools will have to strengthen their online security through collaboration with telecom sectors and online service providers. It also means that schools will have to take a major role in providing guidance and support to our teachers in terms of the kinds of methodologies they will need to use in making that change. There is also going to be a critical need for our principals and administrators to come together in reorganizing the structures in place, especially our timetables. We are seeing in the media that they're talking about shift systems and blended learning. What does that mean? What will our timetables look like? They will have to provide some guidelines also for our online contact time, because depending on the age of our students, there are guidelines out there in terms of how many hours would be required per grade level based on their age. So all of these things are going to be critical implications for our teachers and for our administrators. What will our students need to consider if they're to be successful with this paradigm shift? It also means that students will have to commit to taking greater responsibility for their own learning. It cannot be that materials are being sent and posted and students are disengaged. We saw in that little time when the principals were asked to open the schools for the CXC and CAPE groups, when they interviewed the students, many of them were saying, we're happy to be back in school, we didn't like this online learning, but the truth of the matter is, going forward, this might become a critical part of the way in which education is done. And so students will have to commit to taking greater responsibility, becoming more resilient. They have to become problem solvers. And it also means our students will have to, in some ways, adjust their preferred learning styles, especially when it is incompatible with this paradigm shift. What will our teachers need to do? It also means that our teachers, they have already started, but they will have to continue to adopt flexible and appropriate methodologies to facilitate learning. It also means that our teachers will have to choose the appropriate modes of delivery based on the local e-readiness. They will have to consider the different online platforms, which ones will work for their context, what kinds of other mobile apps and courses they will have to select to integrate into their teaching. Now, there are a lot of open educational resources out there at this time being developed and pushed into the market by many international companies. So there is a way in which teachers will have to play a role in sifting through those different OERs and selecting the ones that are more contextually relevant and culturally relevant for our environment. So I remember early out when this pandemic started, long lists of resources were posted, but teachers couldn't just simply click on them and send them to students. They had to look at them to select which ones would be best suited. So that's another role of a teacher in this new way of thinking and teaching. It also means creating some resources for yourselves and organizing them so that it can support students' learning. So what kind of teacher would you need to be professionally? It means you'll have to be a teacher who is open to change, ready to experiment, willing to be vulnerable in front of your students, because you will be learning about some of these platforms and different devices while you are in fact in front of your students teaching. And so it means you'll have to be willing to make mistakes in front of your students. It will also mean you'll have to be willing to collaborate and to cooperate, because it's going to be a new way of thinking. Collaboration, I cannot overemphasize, will be critical. So you're trying out Zoom, somebody else is trying out Google Meets. These, as teachers, will have to interact with each other to say, hey, I tried this platform, or I came across this resource and I found it useful. Test this out. Try it this way. Have you ever used this particular feature of this device or this platform? So we will have to collaborate with each other if we are to be successful at this paradigm shift. This conversation about the reflective practitioner, oh yes, we have been hearing it over and over for years. Those of us who have gone through teachers' colleges, we would have been emphasizing this idea of a reflective practitioner. It can no longer be something that you simply write an essay or a reflection about. You will have to, in fact, become reflective practitioners, thinking about the way you do your lessons, thinking about what needs to change in order to make them even more successful. The teacher will also have to become the teacher researcher. Research being done by teachers is a way of empowering us in making those changes as we move on to this paradigm shift. And it also means that teachers will have to be ready to take control of their own professional development and growth. So, with all of these things that are required of teachers, what is it that the teachers can do personally to cope? Dr. Sharline Cole is going to take us through some of those different tips on how to cope as a person and teacher during this time.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes-Brown. So we noticed from the previous slides that teaching is very stressful. Added to the pandemic, we are getting more, there is more stress that is affecting teachers. And so how are teachers going to navigate this situation, this environment? How are you going to cope with everything that is happening? So today we'll be talking about some coping mechanisms that you can use. So at the beginning of the pandemic and with what is happening now, you felt anxious, there was panic. So why are you anxious? You're anxious because sometimes you feel unprepared for the online system. Different online systems are there. You're anxious because you're going back to school, you may be required to go back to school, and then you have students who, let's say for example, those who are in early childhood, they like that contact, they like to be hugged, they like all of that. And so students, so you are anxious because of that. You may feel stressed because you wanted to get your students to join online platform, but yet they are not there. And it was reported, it was said by Dr. Jennings and Dr. Haynes-Brown that students sometimes don't really want to join. And she mentioned earlier that when the time was open for them to go back to school, they were happy to go back. So think about that. It is a stressful job as a teacher. And of course, the stress also involved with dealing with the behavioral problems. So you have behavioral problems at school, you're going to also have it online. So how are you going to cope with that as teachers? And of course, there's fear. The fear that you may get it when you go there. The fear that the school may not have the appropriate resources to provide the protocols for sanitization. All of those will affect you as teachers. And of course, you may be exhausted. Working from home, it may be considered interesting, but working from home with your life, your children there, it may affect what you get done. So when you're working at home, it may be exhausting because you're thinking about your family, being a teacher yourself, and of course, homeschooling your children. So, and then it's a problem because you have to find space for you to do your class, for your child to do his or her class, and then other family members are there. And so these are some of the emotions that you'll have. And it's fine to express those emotions. It's fine to feel them because at least you know that when you feel them, you're able to work on changing them. So how do we cope? Yeah. So in order to be able to work with these issues that you are facing, and it's normal, we have to think about ensuring that we have a balanced social, emotional well-being. So that means ensuring that there is mental health, there is social, emotional well-being. Of course, you have to build resilience. And as we go through maintaining mental health, we learn to be able to manage the stressors. We learn to be able to be productive with everything that's happening because we have now learned to cope. So we learn, of course, in coping, we have to ensure that there's that social emotional well-being that is maintained. Because if we don't have that, if we don't have those positive relationships with our family, with our friends, even with our teachers, it could affect how we engage in this online system, even when we re-enter the classroom. And of course, we need to regulate our emotional responses. Normally, when you are frustrated, they tend to have negative emotions. No, we have to now find ways to regulate them because the students that may not be in your presence. They may be elsewhere and before the parent, you will have the students by yourselves, but no, the parents are sometimes in the same setting. You have to find ways to work with both parents and student. And of course, need to build resilience. Being able to withstand the diversity or the stresses that you may experience, and of course, being able to bounce back after this. So, how do we promote those psychosocial well-being? As teachers, we have to manage our expectations. Let us look at, we went out March, the schools were closed in March. And so we realized quite a number of students were not at school, they did not join online platform and everything. So realize that when they return to you, whether it's online or blended or face-to-face, they may not be at that level you expect them to be. So it's important to be patient, to understand where they're coming from, understand the context of the student and work with them from there. And with that, set long-term goals as teachers. It could be improving your students' performance. It could also be for you doing studying. I think now is the perfect time for you to study because you may be online and it may be easier for you to maneuver the system because you are there, you don't have to move to campus, whichever university you plan to study. So maybe it's important, so you can set those long-term goals. Maybe it's to do some gardening, maybe to build something, you can do those achieve those goals. And of course, have a routine. When you're in the system before everything closed, you had a routine where you wake up, you do different activities, and you go to work. The same routine should maintain when you are at home. Because if you don't set that routine, you are going to get more frustrated, you're going to get flustered, it's going to affect your online time, your online teaching. And of course, communicate with persons. So it can be via phone, it could be via WhatsApp, it's up to you. Communication builds that strength, build that connection. And it's not just you're communicating with, you're communicating with your peers, even your parents, your students' parents. Because when you're able to communicate with them, sometimes they just need the teacher saying, oh, where's everything? They'll feel comfortable that the teacher is there to help them. And of course, we all have heard this. Minimize the amount and types of news we hear on COVID. We have fake news. So be conscious of what you listen to. And remember to take regular breaks. Don't constantly work on the same activity over and over again. So just like when Dr. Haynes-Brown mentioned about the length of time that the student should be on the platform, you need to think about that. When you work with a child who is an early childhood, at the HL level. You cannot spend too long with that child being on the system. So think about that. Just like you give the child a break, you need to take the break too as a teacher. Balance your online and offline activities, which was said. Offer support to others. And it's always important that you offer support, because it's when you offer support, you become to appreciate what others are facing. You realize that there's something that I can do other than just being at home, helping others. It's important to help and offer support. So we continue connecting with others. It's important to build those connections, and those connections could be maybe WhatsApp, maybe video call, conferencing. That connection works. And remember that the connection, when you build those connections, it helps with your own personal well-being. It helps with even reducing the level of stress that you may feel. And of course, checking in on your friends. Be there for your friends. Be there for family members who may need your help, because you may have family members who may not be able to come out because they may have underlying illnesses, and so you need to keep check with them, because sometimes they need just somebody to talk to, and it's important to do that. And it's very important as individuals, doesn't matter if you're a teacher, child, to share your feelings and experiences. When you're able to share those feelings and experiences, you're able to understand what someone else is going through. You're able to empathize what is happening and how to help that person. And sometimes when you share those feelings and experiences, you're able to realize, oh, I have the same problem, and we can learn from each other. And of course, engage in positive thinking. When you think positive, when you think about when you move away from being negative, think about opportunities instead of the problems. You're more likely to have a clearer mindset, a mindset where you're able to see things optimistically instead of pessimistically. You're able to look at things with a different lens, and it's very important. So sometimes cognitive restructuring works for individuals, so you can think, so when something happens bad, what should happen? What should I do? What can I do to change this? And of course, self-help. Glasses. And of course, self-care is very important. So spend the time working with others without looking out for yourself. It's important to look out for you. Set routines, set boundaries for yourself. What are the things that you will achieve? What are the things that you want to get done? And of course, within this self-help, the boundaries that you set will help you to manage your time and to, of course, accommodate your students that you'll have. And they will know when is the best time to reach the teacher. And importantly, do what is enjoyable. As individuals, we need to enjoy ourselves, to enjoy our own company. And of course, anything that you enjoy doing is now the best time to do it, because when you do what you enjoy, it will make the whole issue of the pandemic, the problems that are affecting you less serious. So it's important to enjoy. If it's resting, if it's reading a book, if it's gardening, have fun, do it. And of course, find a time for laughter. Laughter is the best medicine for any illness. It reduces stress, it reduces fatigue, so laugh. Maybe watch your favorite movie, watch your favorite cartoon, whatever makes you laugh, use it. It is going to help you to cope in this time. And of course, with all of this, we need to relax. It's important to relax after a day. So don't keep working, and then you're burnt out. Relaxation is the best medicine to be able to rejuvenate for the next day. So it's important to relax. So maybe you relax with watching a movie, playing a game. You decide what is your relaxation. And as you build resilience, you need to accept what is out of your control. There are things that we don't have control over. You can control where you stay, you can control where you visit. There are things you will not be able to control. And of course, with the changes that is taking place, you have to embrace it and work with what changes that come your way. It's important to embrace change. And of course, staying focused on the big picture. The big picture for you may be to get your students achieving success, maintain that. Maintain a positive attitude. Think about the things that will help your student, that will add value to your student's success. Think about how your students going to achieve and become excellent at the end of the day. And practice mindfulness and acceptance. It's always important to think about, to be grateful for things that happen, to be grateful for the small things, to share with others, and plan activities each day and anticipate potential short-term stresses. So remember, life is not perfect. Life is not perfect, so there are going to be challenges, so it's up to cope it. And as we know, we cannot control everything, but what you control are your attitudes, the news that you can turn off, and what are the things that you do. There are things you can't control. You can't control the people who are getting it. You can control your environmental context. Okay?
And thank you very much, Dr. Cole. That was a very useful part of what needed to be considered today. It would not be complete without a discussion of how it is that we can begin to consider our coping mechanisms. So there are a few questions in the chat that we'll try to address in the last 15 minutes. And one of those questions that was recurring in the chat was, how do we address the considerations for special needs education? What will happen with our special needs students? And because Dr. Cole has some specialization in that, I would think she'd be the best person to answer our questions related to what about education going forward for special needs? What needs to be considered?
Okay, for the special needs teachers, firstly, the platform that we have currently may not be able to accommodate all of them. And so for example, the person who is visually impaired may be able to hear, but the person who's auditory impaired may have to use caption. But I think the major part of this is that the schools need to be able to get the parents more involved. Because sometimes, depending on the need that the student has, you may need to have the parents there with the child while the class is taking place. And sometimes you may need to have some routine for those students, because the routine will help them to be able to do the work. But with that, it's important to have that collaborative effort with the school, the principal, and of course, the teachers. So it's important to maintain that. And of course, the students need to know that the teacher is always there. And teacher is always there for me as my support.
Thank you very much for that response. And I would want to add to that too, that for parents of special needs, because there is also a comment relating to what should parents do, it is also evident that with this blended learning approach that will potentially become a part of our paradigm shift, there will be need for some support for our parents. So this has implications for administrations in terms of the school and the government. There will be need for collaboration in helping our parents to transition, to prepare their children at home, teaching their children how to adapt to the new routines and schedules, because things may never look the same. So I do believe that in addition to what you have said, Dr. Cole, there is a way in which there will be need for some training as well for our parents. There was also a set of questions relating to what support systems are going to be put in place to help our teachers to transition online. What kinds of support systems do you think we need to put in place? So one of the questions specifically, this question spoke about being an educator trained to deliver your curriculum face-to-face. What are the support systems or strategies that will be made available to assist educators to teach online? And this is in fact a key part of what will be required for us to transition online. Dr. Tentus, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that what we have been doing during this pandemic, many educators and researchers have been quick to point out that what we have been doing is not really online teaching, it's emergency education. So this mad scramble to suddenly deliver face-to-face curricula in an online format has been extremely challenging, because many of us do not have that training. We do not have the support systems to teach online. So what it's going to mean is that we are going to have a lot of training, a lot of thinking about what it means to manage in an online environment. Certainly, there's there are courses. People do masters and doctoral degrees in how to teach in the online environment. So if you are finding it stressful, don't feel badly. Many of us, I would argue, large numbers of us are in the same situation. But I think what I'd like to say is that what's important is that it's very hard for people on the outside to know what teachers are facing. So you have to, at this point, become an advocate for yourself. You have to tell the people that are, that you're working for, your schools, your principals, your parents, what your needs are, because they don't know. So I think that that's a critical thing. Tashane?
Yes, and another thing I'd want to add to that is teaching online is not the same as teaching face-to-face. And I remember at the very beginning of this pandemic, when the lockdown started, there were teachers who were simply trying to lift the materials as they were, teaching in the very same way. And we can't blame our teachers for that. Because if you think about it, there is a different kind of philosophy that underpins online teaching and learning. And our teachers have not been trained in that. So I think at the basic level at this point, it also has implications for the suggested teaching activities. The curriculum is new for the high schools and the NSC curricula. But at this point, it also means that there might potentially be room for some realigning of that curriculum. If it is we're going to be going into blended modalities, the way the curriculum has been structured, the number of terms and content and weeks, and the number of hours dedicated to each. If we're doing shift systems and we're doing blended learning and all of that, it also has implications for the government, and the Ministry of Education will have to reconfigure that very new curriculum, even though it is a good way, a good start. But if teachers are to teach online, to transition to this blended way of teaching, it is grounded in a different way of teaching. There are persons, as Dr. Gentes has mentioned, who have gone through the training and understand what it takes to teach online. And so there will need to be formal training of our teachers, not just what I want to call a toolkit to say here are some different courses and here are some strategies. There is also need for a realignment of the way in which we think about teaching and learning if we are to be successful in an online space. So that transition, the support systems, there's going to be need for a change in our belief systems. And I consider this a critical part of the discussion because a lot of times the way we think about classroom teaching and learning will affect the way we deliver, because some teachers simply transitioned to online doing the very same things, posting a lot of content and telling students to read and repeat and regurgitate, because that is a part of their mindset, their approach. So there's going to be need for changes in our belief systems. There's going to be need for a solid understanding of the philosophy that underpins online teaching and learning if we are to support them.
And to add to Dr. Haynes-Brown, she mentioned earlier about the developmental level of the student. You cannot have an online session with for 1 hour with an early childhood student. You have to think about the age level. So when you would have them before you every day, you'll be able to, you would normally give them activities, be able to keep them occupied. You don't have them in your space. You have to think about how is it you're going to work with your students when you're not there with them, and for them to get enough information. It doesn't make sense to give them so much when they're not even getting it. It's important to think about the timeline, the age level, and how is it they're going to deliver that content.
All right, so there are a number of questions, so we're choosing from the questions, right? So there is a set of questions here also referring to what do we think should be done to help our students to make the transition. So the teachers are also concerned about how will we help our students? What can we do? Because one of the things Dr. Gentes mentioned earlier, teachers are now being asked to monitor students' behavior while they're online and at home. So there is very little you can do. Punitive measures are limited in terms of how we manage their behavior. And sometimes they might log in and they turn off the camera and they walk away. And that is going to be a critical part, because if the teachers are putting out their 100%, and the students are not engaging with what is happening because they just don't want to change their way of learning. What does that mean for a teacher? So are there any suggestions, guys, that we could give to the teachers in terms of how to motivate the students to make that transition?
So I think at the beginning of school, we'll start school. The same way you'll make your ground rules for face-to-face teaching, make the same ground rules for online teaching. And so the students know exactly what are the expectations of my class, what are expected behaviors. You may not have them in the same space, but you set the expectations for them and make sure you live by that. You are consistent with that and ensure that the students follow.
I think too that you're building on what you're saying is that we're going to have to figure out, strict, put structures in place so that the students know what to expect. This is all new for them as well. So, but it's going to take a long time. So, now we can start socializing our children at very early ages for this online environment. But those who have not been socialized or who are further along are going to find it difficult. So we also have to exercise patience because it's a real, trial and error situation that we have going here now. But I think it's important to have structures, and it's also important for you as teachers to just be flexible and creative and to think of ways in which you can keep the students, wanting to come back for more. I think it's really important too for us to understand that the way we think about our teaching is changing dramatically, because previously, if you think about it, you were in school for 8 hours with your students. But in that 8 hours, you were not teaching for 8 hours straight. There was social activities for children. There was lunch. There was, breakfast. There was devotion. There was PE. They were moving from teacher to teacher. Now suddenly, it's you. And you have to keep those children engaged for a period of time online. And that's very, very difficult. It changes the way that we think about ourselves as a teacher. So these are things you have to think about yourself and then think about how does the challenges I have, that's going to be magnified for my students. So work from there. We just have to be creative and flexible, I think. Yeah.
And to add to that, I do believe that we also have to consider as we move forward in terms of this whole idea of a lifelong learner. So teachers have to be open to becoming researchers. We have to be willing to experiment, because to engage our students for 5 or 6 hours per day, I watched my children logging on to very long sessions, sitting in one location all day. That can be very difficult. And so it has implications for you as a teacher, how you redesign. And also, I'm going to be very frank, when you think about a teacher who is boring face-to-face is going to be boring online, or probably doubly as boring online. So therefore, it also means that you have to be prepared. Lesson planning, preparation, those things are key. You're going to have, as Dr. Jenkins pointed out, if you're having a 1-hour session, it's going to be 1 hour in the line of fire. You have to be facing that camera for that 1 hour. You have to have activities. You have to have everything structured so that the lesson runs smoothly. The moment you have to step away from the camera and say, give me 5 minutes, guys, to go and grab something and come back, you lose your students. So in that online space, it also means that teachers have to plan. Teachers have to become creative. And I talked about vulnerability, being willing to try things out. And I'll give you an example. When we went online at UE here, and I decided I was tired of having Zoom sessions where we were all together in the same space, because I love group work. And I heard about breakout rooms. I went online. I went to YouTube. I watched several videos on breakout rooms. I went to my next class. I said, guys, I've learned about this feature, breakout rooms, so you can work in groups. I'm going to test it out today. It might not go so well, but let's be willing to try this together. After the first 2 lessons, it was fun. So guys, you will have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to change. And that's going to be a critical part of it.
Yeah. As Dr. Haynes-Brown mentioned about planning for the learner, we also think about the different learners based on their learning styles. when the visual and the auditory will be able to manage online, what is it about the kinesthetic learner? Or where you're going to accommodate this learner? So you have to plan and plan for all the students to meet all the needs. So it's important to know the students that you have. You may just get in them the first time, but some of you would have had them before. Find out from the other teachers who the students were, what they are, and so you can plan for those students. You can plan to accommodate different learning styles so that some of them don't get left out in the teaching learning process.
And there's a question here, Dr. Cole, that I think is right up your street. It says, parents need to become more involved in the education of their children. What suggestions can you give to parents to assist the children in the virtual environment?
Okay, for parents, the first thing is to communicate with with the teachers. What are the expectations? Know exactly what is being done from school. And so you know exactly what the child should be doing at every time that they should be logging on. And of course, monitor and supervise them while they're at home. And for those who work, that is where a challenge is. So you need to have somebody, as in an individual who is going to be responsible while you're not there, and ensure that there's consistency, your discipline, consistency, your support, consistency, you engage that child at home. And when there's consistency, and when you're able to work with the parent, with the teachers, you're like to know what is happening. So the child will not say, I didn't get this, I didn't get that, because you already have a relationship with the teacher. I know what is happening, I know what the child should be doing. And so consistency is very important.
And just to add to that, as we talk about parental involvement and what to put in place, I'm just thinking, as a parent myself, going into September, where, let's face it, the learning management platforms where you post materials will continue to be a part of what we do. And so it means, therefore, that one of the things I appreciated was getting a timetable, getting updates weekly to say that, okay, these are the things that the child is expected to log on to the platform and submit for the week. It means more work for the teacher and the administration of the schools, but there's also a way in which, if we want parents to become involved in what is happening in those remote spaces outside of the face-to-face classroom, we will have to give them greater control over management by providing them with the necessary information. Sometimes, if parents don't know that this deadline is to be met, these are the assignments, these are the videos you can watch with your child to assist, because we also have to bear in mind the academic level of our parents sometimes. Some assignments, when they are sent home without adequate guidance, parents are unable to help, and that is when parents tend to take a hands-off approach. So I think sometimes to looking for the YouTube videos that you think will assist the child outside of the face-to-face session, posting that in addition to the assignments that you're putting on the learning management platform. These kinds of things are going to be a part of what administration will have to put structures in place. It will require more routines. Things have to become routine. So if there's going to be 3 days a week when assignments must be uploaded by a certain time, it also means that the school has to stick to that schedule as well. So I think these are some of the things that we can do to ease the stress on parents, to get them more involved, right? We're just going to share a few comments at this time that were made that we think will be interesting and important for consideration. I see here, planning for teaching and learning online should be an organized, collaborative process. A technology teacher leader can be identified to lead the process. And that is a very critical point, guys. We need technology leaders in our schools. And there is also a comment in terms of the fact that teachers will need to become more vibrant and demonstrate flexibility while teaching online. Also, they will need to be more creative and solution-oriented to become effective teachers going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us online. This was a very critical session. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to having more discussions like these in the future. Bye-bye.